everyone, good afternoon. I'm Christopher. I'll be introducing our company and a little bit about what we do in a few moments. Really though, the concept that we had and what we wanted to share was what we do, a little bit the technicalities of international logistics, of global shipping. Just a quick intro, a 101 course. So basically, I'm the president of Sea Lion Cargo. We are an international logistics company, a freight forwarder. That means we move things around the world. We have been in business for 10 years. Most of our business, our core business still today is what we would call general cargo. However, we have built out over the last 2 years a specific division called crypto logistics. Several of our colleagues are here. I'll introduce them in a moment. So we've become very excited, very passionate about moving ASICs, containers, transformers, turbines, and a lot from Asia, from the factories into North America, to Paraguay, to Kazakhstan, or wherever you're mining essentially is where we're moving the goods. So as I said, concept really here is speak a little bit less about who we are and more about the industry, what we do, and maybe some things to be aware of, whether you're buying or whether you're moving ASICs around the world. Basically, the concept is I'll take you a little bit through the different steps. First thing when you're completing a commercial transaction or a new business is you have to agree with your buyer on what the Incoterm is. Incoterms basically define and explain who is responsible for what part of the transaction and where the risk transfers. So we call that risk versus control. And there's some reasons why you would want to say to someone, I'll pick it up from your factory door. There's other reasons why you might want to say to someone, no, you do everything, just deliver it to my mining site on this date. And these Incoterms define all the different modes or the different agreements that can be had between two parties. Mainly in this space, what you'll see is Ex Works, which means you're agreeing to pick up at their factory. You'll see a lot of DAP, which is they're going to deliver it to your facility, but you're going to clear customs. And DDP, which is they're going to send it to your facility and clear customs for you. Those are the three most common terms used. Why is it important to understand these and master these? Well, I guess there's two primary benefits. The first is it's a significant cost saving. Whoever's doing the logistics is generally going to charge a premium for that service. They're putting their time into it. They are also taking on risk. They're assuming responsibility. And so they're going to want to be rewarded for that. So if you're buying on a DDP basis, you can pretty much expect that it's going to cost you more than if you approached a logistics provider yourself directly and said, I want to pick up from that factory. So that's one reason why you would want to do an Ex Works transaction. The other benefit is customer service, where everybody, whether you're in a hardware or you're in a service industry, how you provide the service to your customers matters. And being able to take on more of that responsibility of the transport means you can be more flexible. You can provide a better customer service. You can tell your clients where their goods are. You can change the destination of the goods. So it basically gives you much more control and allows you to be able to give an improved service to your customers. So once you've decided who's doing what, the next question is how is it going to move? Typically, things are moved by ocean, air, or there's a third option, which is courier. Courier is the most expensive. It works well if you're moving 1, 2 ASICs. You can consider a courier option. You have very little say in how things are done by DHL or by FedEx or Purolator. But it is an easy, maybe one-click solution in some cases. Most of what we do is air or ocean. Majority is air. And now you're speaking about individual shipments from location A to location B. And it will be a direct transit. Sometimes there's a stopover or a change of aircraft, just as a passenger travel would be. In fact, a lot of cargo is actually moved under the belly of passenger aircraft. So they follow the same routes. Of course, there are freighter options and other options that are direct to the destination of the mining site. So that first consideration when you're trying to choose between air and ocean is the transit cost. Air is typically several times more expensive than an ocean solution. But what you also have to consider is what is your opportunity cost to choose an ocean transit? If you're shipping from Bitmain's factory in Thailand or Indonesia and you're doing ocean, you're probably looking at 40 or 60 days. If you're shipping S19s, you're shipping XPs, you want to consider if your site's ready to be deployed, how much is it costing you to have those miners on the water and not hashing? So that's an important consideration. And then finally, obviously, when is the deployment date? When is the site going to be ready? In many cases, we're arriving, if we've timed things well, we're arriving just when they're ready to go live or a little bit before. So the miners are sitting there ready for people to rack them and plug them in. And one more advantage to Air that I would mention is it's much less susceptible to global supply chain, to political risks, to strikes. So Air is a much more reliable solution. Ocean could be 40 days, could be 60 days. But some things like containers or transformers would just be far too expensive to move by air. We do get inquiries sometimes to put them in an Antonov and ship them to the Middle East. These things do happen, but it's not the typical way. It's not the most cost-effective way to move your containers around the world. So once you've figured out how it's being shipped, the next thing to decide on is who are the key components of the transactions that are going to be declared to the shippers and to customs authorities. Typically, what we'll see in a ASIC transaction is there'll be a seller, there'll be a shipper, there'll be an importer, there'll be a buyer, and there'll be a receiver. Very quickly, the difference between the seller and the shipper: the seller is the one who's actually providing the goods to you. They have the contract, you have a contract with them. The shipper is where it's leaving from. So let's say Bitmain's facility on Batam Island in Indonesia. So in this case, Bitmain's factory is going to be the shipper, not Bitmain itself. Then the importer is the person who's going to take the responsibility in front of, let's say, CBP, as being the importer of record. They're responsible for making sure that the proper documentation and the proper declarations are done. They're also responsible for the duties and taxes being paid. Of course, a company like us will provide that service. It can be done via us. We will introduce the customs broker. I think we'll touch on that in the next slide. And then finally, you have the buyer. The buyer is the one who's made that purchase contract from the seller, may not be the one who's ultimately receiving the goods. Often in this industry, the goods are actually going to a site, they're going to a facility, and so that's another party that has to be recorded on the transaction. In a nutshell, there are three components to an international transaction. You must have a commercial invoice. It's not necessarily your invoice with the buyer. Commercial invoice can be prepared just for customs purposes, completely legal as long as the information is correct and valid. That's the most common way of preparing a commercial invoice, and a packing list, which basically the packing list explains what's being transported. And then finally, we have the bill of lading. The bill of lading is really the contract of transport, and it, in some cases, is also the title deed. The equivalent of a title deed will show who the owner of the goods is during transport. So that is an important part of a bill of lading. And then here on the bottom, actually, that's something that we provide to our clients, or it's open even if you're not our client, you want to ask one of our team members for it. We have an Excel template that autofills commercial invoices and packing lists. You can do drop downs, pull the model that you want, whether it's from Bitmain or from What's Miner or Canaan, whatever it is. You can pull it from the drop down, and it will calculate the weight per pallet, etc. Anyway, it's something that's available. Come to me or one of our team members if you'd like to get that. It's an Excel file, super simple, and we give you the password to unlock it is crypto, and you can go with it and do with it as you feel best. Moving on, so we've spoken a little bit about the documentation. The next consideration is insurance. I will not talk a lot about this because I think we just had a speech about insurance. I heard that from the backs of the stage. Basically, what, in a nutshell, what you do want to consider is the value. You want to make sure that the insurer that is providing it to you will insure the maximum value of the goods. In addition to the value of the goods, typically you can also insure the value of the transportation because you had to pay to bring them in. And you can also choose to add a premium. So for our contract, it's very common that we'll insure the value of the miner, the value of the transport, plus an extra 10% as part of that insurance contract. And the idea is that there's going to be additional costs that you're going to have as well during the insurance process and during the claims process. Very important in this industry, the commodity. It's not just electronics, it's actually a crypto miner. the insurance world knows what that is. A lot of big global insurers will not. They have exclusions for anything crypto related. Many freight forwarders, providers don't even know that they have that exclusion inside of their contract. So if you are doing this, ask questions, ask to see the policy, ask to see the insurance certificate. Obviously, we have a policy specifically for Antminers, specifically for cryptos, specifically for ASICs. And so we've done our due diligence and our work in order to have that prepared. Then obviously there's some exclusions and deductibles. I'm not going to educate you on what that is. I think everyone understands that pretty well. Finally, this is one thing I do want to touch on. I have just about a minute left, but I think it is important. We're moving many, many pallets every day around the world. We see a lot of good examples of packaging. We see a lot of bad examples of packaging. Very quickly, the concepts in packaging are here. These are all used miners. Starting with new is too easy. So you either have individual miners in their boxes with foam, best way to do this. Next, when you're using shipping a lot of miners, it's quite cost prohibitive to palletize and individually box each one. So this is what we call gator style. If you see the picture below, that would be the inside of a gator pallet. There's some packaging, there is some material protecting it. Most important though is everything's being kept in line and together, which is very important. The next one is finally the last style that we would recommend. And even in some cases, we'd have to warn you that that may not be covered by an insurance company. So there's a clause for safe transport. So we'd have to see pictures of what's being done if you have any questions. And that basically has a layer between each one and then a wrap. Anything to the right of that concept is not a safe way to move miners. We wouldn't recommend it. We see a ton of it, but it's not the recommended way to go. These are high value equipment and they're not handled with care by truckers and other people in the supply chain. Final point, CBP customs. This is something that obviously it's a concern for a lot of people. We see it every day. When you're working with an international logistics provider like us, we work directly with the customs broker and we're directly responsible for the filings made to CBP. So we can use specific HS codes, we can provide additional documentation, we can interact with the CBP officer if needed. Actually, in the vast majority of our transactions, that does not happen. Probably 1 out of 100. I don't have the statistics, but it's about 1 out of 100 times that we're involved with CBP. We're a known entity, we're moving a lot of them, and for the most part, everything has been smooth. Final thing that we provide, I'm going to touch on it in my last few moments here, is bonded warehousing. We serve a lot of miners, but also we serve resellers. The duties and taxes can be quite prohibitive, especially when it's used miners coming from China and there's taxes, or punitive taxes, which can be 25% or more. What we do is we can bring them into bonded facilities in ORD or other airports and then break them down and distribute them, and this will defer the cost of importing them into US commerce and paying duties and taxes until after you've made that resale transaction. So it's a way to bring them into America but not actually have to pay the duties and taxes. You can leave that for your buyers to do, or you can do it only at the time that you're transferring the miners to them. And that's it pretty much. We have a booth here, booth number 76. You might have seen the big air freight pallet kind of in the sky held up by a forklift. That's us. And we have 6 of our colleagues here that would be happy to meet you, happy to answer any questions you have. This was a very, very small intro, but anyway, we're here. We can answer much more specific or technical questions if you have them. So thank you very much, everyone, and I will leave the floor to the next person.